What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Actually Good Coffee podcast, the show where we talk about all things coffee related, all while drinking a cup of coffee. This past week, we sold 629 pounds of coffee total. If we're looking at the same week last year, we sold 684 pounds of coffee total. Before you say anything, I know. We sold more coffee last year than we did this year. Am I upset? I'm pretty upset, but this is the second time that this has happened this year. And although it's crippling to my self-worth, like I've mentioned before in this podcast, there are other things that I try to focus on with Maiden and not just total volume coffee sales. The investments that we're making right now into Maiden are going to be the most beneficial long-term, even if we aren't seeing it on a week-by-week basis. But that's all right. It's okay that some weeks we're not going to sell as much as we did in the years previous, and that's just because there's more attention going elsewhere. It's going to serve as a better resource to our customers in the long run. So in keeping with that, I actually want to talk about today's topic. Today I wanted to talk about the recent news, well, I guess not recent, but has recently gained a lot of traction, and reasonably so, the East Coast port strike. This has been a huge topic within the coffee industry lately, really any industry that gets their products through America's imports. Recently, we're getting to the end of a contract between a couple unions that work on all of the East and Gulf Coast ports that actually deload all of the cargo ships bringing the goods into America. There's a couple articles I wanted to read. The first one is from Royal Coffee New York. This is by Andrew Blith. Andrew states, the International Longshoremen's Association, the ILA, and the United States Maritime Alliance, the USMA, are threatening a labor strike starting on October 1st. A total of 45,000 workers make up these unions, so the strike would impact all East and Gulf Coast ports. The last time a strike happened like this was in 1977, so the hope is that an agreement will be made, obviously. If this strike does happen, this will cause a huge disruption to afloat and forward shipments of coffee. Now, many politicians and economists and logistics experts are actually calling for a pre-strike resolution. So most people are assuming that this is going to be resolved before the end of the contract, which is September 30th. I think the U.S. has a pretty good record of coming to a solution in comparison to a lot of European countries that I see dealing with these sort of labor strikes. So I'm curious to see what will happen. This is a huge deal if this does go through, considering that coffee is mostly imported through the East and Gulf Coast. They make up about, I think it's 80%. I will double check that. I also saw a most recent update by the NCA, the National Coffee Association. These guys are like on the front lines for all coffee news. It's pretty interesting to see. The NCA is communicating to the U.S. government at every level just how large of a potential impact this strike could have on coffee. Not just other imports, but coffee especially. The ILA is threatening to strike at 36 U.S. ports. If a deal with the USMA, the United States Maritime Alliance, isn't reached before the contract ends on September 30th, the two parties are at odds over wages, wouldn't you believe it, but also the use of automated and semi-automated machines for unloading imports. So it's pretty interesting to see how this whole AI push is actually affecting even the blue-collar worker, which is a bummer. The USMX filed an unfair labor practice charge against the ILA for failure to bargain in good faith. This was the most recent update from today, September 26th. So pretty interesting. Do I think that's a big deal? We'll keep going. I'll get to that at the end. The NCA has joined 200 associations and a separate coalition of 56 agriculture groups urging Biden to press for a speedy resolution. I think people forget that sometimes, as these ports are not just importing coffee. Again, it's all imported goods coming into America, which is a lot. It's not just this one commodity. In the past, George Bush used executive power under the Taft-Hartley Act to halt a lockout. Obviously, I'm sure that's not what people are going to want this situation to come to, but that might be the case. That might have to be what happens in this situation. So why is this so important? Why should you care if there's a labor strike on the East and Gulf Coast ports? Well, good question. If we're looking at the total imports from 2021 all the way to 2023, 80% of green coffee imports entered through the Gulf or East Coast ports. A single day's disruption will immediately cascade and multiply. The effects have actually already begun. There are reports that carriers are imposing or staging surcharges and that ports are implementing potential work stoppage plans. Basically, they're now charging more for stored coffee within the United States. There's little to no built-up inventory to buffer a supply chain rupture, as market conditions for some time have led to a drawn down of U.S. green coffee stocks. The strike will exacerbate the impact of existing supply chain challenges. Not only will this cause a problem for the average coffee drinker, this is going to cause problems for a lot of people within the country. In my opinion, I do think there's going to be a resolution. I think there's too much riding on this. It's an election year. We are a country that's heavily reliant on our imports. In fact, 4 out of the top 6 states in the United States are on the East and Gulf Coast. There's Texas, New York, New Jersey, and Georgia, equivalent to about, I think that's $125 billion worth of imports. Part of it being an election year, the Democratic Party, in order to add more to their resume, they're going to have to get this deal done. That is such a bad look on the party if they're not able to get this deal done in time for the election coming up. Now, the opposing argument to this deal getting done so quickly is that the intention isn't there, and maybe there are some artificial solutions to the underlying problems within this situation, and long term, that's not such a great thing for the industry. But to at least bring these people back to the discussion table and then allow for more time to actually come up with a proper solution, this is something that needs to get resolved before the deadline of the contract. I personally think there's too much riding on this for them to not get a deal done before these contracts expire. They usually go up until the last day before they expire. I don't know why, but I guess that's just when everybody's done throwing all these threats around, that they're done filing an unfair labor practice charge against other unions for failure to bargain in good faith. I think they will get a deal done before the end of the year, but we'll just have to wait and see. Thank you guys for listening. I really do appreciate it, and I will talk to you again very soon.